All right. Okay, so welcome everybody to our guest speaker tonight. We have Headsup Concussion Advocacy Network. Welcome, Seth. So, Headsup CAN is a nonprofit organization with a mission to challenge the stigma surrounding brain injuries and mental health. The organization began 3 years ago after Ryan Sutton experienced his fifth concussion, who is unable to attend today because of concussion symptoms. He experienced this concussion while attending Brock University as a sports management student. At the time, he was living with Seth, and the two of them began a dialogue about their personal experiences with this injury. Even though they both sustained concussions in their lifetime, they realized that their experiences were very different from each other. From their conversations, they learned that the only commonality they shared from their history with concussions was the sense of alienation that arose due to the lack of awareness and understanding that people had around them. This ignited the idea of creating a community for people with lived experiences. Over the past 3 years, Headsup CAN has been able to reach people all over the country and continue to share stories of individuals with lived experiences in an effort to bring an empathetic approach to concussions and mental health. So their mission to challenge the stigma continues to be a guiding purpose, and they're looking forward to sharing a little bit more about what they do and the programs they've established with us tonight. So welcome, Seth, and I will mute myself, and it's all you.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, I'm really, really grateful to be here and to speak with all of you. So I guess I want to start with sharing a bit about my story. I grew up playing all kinds of sports, but football was the one that I really gravitated to the most. And I played 8 years at a varsity level. And it wasn't until my final season in my senior year in grade 12 where I received my first diagnosed concussion, which is such an important aspect to my story because even though I've only been diagnosed with one, I can look back at my career playing all different kinds of sports and think about those times where I didn't really know exactly where I was. And one of the interesting things that comes to football, unlike any other sport, is the plays only really last about 7 seconds. And you have about a 30-second, time to recuperate. And in a lot of that time, and what we learn as football players, as athletes within this hyper masculine culture, you kind of have to, hold things in and be tough and act like a leader and not show weakness. So, throughout my 8 years, I look back at all the times where I wasn't really sure, where my surroundings were. And it took me those 30 seconds to kind of recuperate. But the one I experienced in my senior year really played a toll on me. I remember it was 2 weeks before the season started. We had a new coach that I was trying to impress, and I went to make a hit on one of the bigger players on our team, who had substantially more size than I did, and his knee went right into my head. And immediately I was just like dizzy and heard ringing. Thankfully, my coaches looked at me and said, "You need to get this checked out." And I went to the hospital. I went to a doctor first, and they said it was a mild concussion, which I've now learned through my journey. There's no such thing as a mild concussion. What happened after, what kind of transpired throughout my recovery was this, as Claire mentioned with our story, this alienation where for me, I was able to kind of go back to school relatively quickly and be in class, but I wasn't able to play in the game or practice with my teammates, and no one really understood why. Unlike, breaking your arm where you have a cast and people can see and sympathize and, write their signatures on. When it comes to the brain, as I'm sure we're all aware, it's invisible to other people. And, for me, someone who has a good, I like to say that I have the gift of gab and I can articulate a lot of, the things that I go through. When I had that brain injury, I wasn't able to. And so for me, a lot of my symptoms were actually mental health related. Before that injury, I was never a kid who had anxiety or depression. And that was something that, started to really surface because of this injury. And it wasn't until I went to university and went on this journey and this path of now taking with Headsup CAN, where I started to realize the correlation. And I think that's such an ironic thing that comes with the brain injury landscape. I think we often from stories that I've heard and from stories that I've experienced, we hit our head, and we immediately assume, migraines, the physical symptoms that kind of come with it. But, the symptomology is so vast. And I don't think enough people realize the correlation between mental health that can really, you know, surface and affect you, um, a week, 2 weeks, a month, even years down the road. And for me, like I said, it wasn't until I'd met Ryan and we talked about our experiences where I really understood what I went through. And one of the biggest things that I've reflected on too is when I was sitting off playing football, and we had games, I would see my friends, like my really good friends and my teammates, come out of the game, you know, not looking like they just looked like no one was home. They were kind of just trying to isolate themselves so they can get back in the game and no one talked to them. And one of my biggest regrets in life is that I didn't speak up back then, and I didn't really know how to. It wasn't really in the culture to speak up in that context. And now, as I've obviously gone through this journey, our whole goal is to advocate, to share people's lived experience, and trying to humanize this injury that I think really affects a lot more people, than we actually understand or know. So that's a little bit about my story. I can kind of go into heads up story if you want me to, Claire, or if you have questions, whatever's easiest for you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right,
There's no
awesome.
questions yet, but I'll let you know.
Okay, sounds good. So, Heads Up started in our third year of university. Both Ryan and myself attended Brock University as sport management students, and he had suffered his fifth concussion at the time, as Claire had mentioned earlier. And we both started kind of talking about our experiences. And the one thing that we realized was, even though we had suffered a concussion, for him, his symptoms were much different than mine. And we realized that the one thing, that lacked within our recovery was that community aspect. So we decided to take matters into our own hands, and we started, one of the first things we did was just set a table, on campus at Brock University to talk about our experiences and to kind of share what we've gone through. And, we had hundreds of students walk by us asking what a concussion was, and not understanding that mental health and concussions have this direct correlation. And that was like the first thing we ever did as an organization. And it really sparked, I would say, our entire journey and this passion to raise awareness. And soon after, we ended up partnering with the Canadian Concussion Center, and got to meet, world-renowned neuroscientist Dr. Charles Tatter. And had a really good partnership with him, where we were able to donate close to $5,000 to their research to help move and progress, what the amazing work that they were doing. So that was an amazing accomplishment. And for us, Claire did such a good job, doing a description and kind of sharing what we're all about. But we're really trying to humanize the concussion experience, because, I'm someone who is definitely guilty of being naive that concussions only happen in sports. And I think that's the only realm it gets talked in. But, as I've gone through this journey and I've learned, 70% of concussions aren't even sport related. And there are so many people who don't understand what they're going through, don't even know if they're going through a concussion in the first place, and some of the different recovery methods that could help them. And it takes, next thing you know, years off their life where they just don't feel normal. They don't feel like they can talk about it with other people. So a lot of what we do is, through the online platform, as we now live in this new world, especially, we've adapted a lot to creating this online support community, where we use the power of social media to promote positivity, to share people's experiences. We recently started an advocate program that has 65, Canadians all over the country who have shared their stories with us, who we still, connect with them on a daily basis to figure out ways to promote positive content and share their journeys. Because I think that's one of the biggest things is, when we go through a concussion, what happens to me and what happens to the next person is two very different stories. And we need to showcase and highlight those differences to really understand and provide an empathetic outlook to what people go through. Because, there's too many stories of people, years in, still not being able to find recovery or support from the people closest to them. And there's that, stigma that's really associated with not only the mental health side of things, but also the recovery side of things. And that's where our mission has really become to challenge the stigma. And it's really become like our guiding compass for a lot of things, because we realize that, there's been such a stigmatization surrounding concussions and brain injuries. And if we can provide um, support and relief to people who are struggling, it does diminish that stigma. And so we've done things like webinars, and honestly, it's been a lot through this, new pandemic virtual world, but we've done webinars. We did a whole campaign on Concussion Awareness Month. Like I mentioned, we have our advocate program. We actually just recently launched our Concussion Awareness Facilitator program, where we actually get people with lived experience to share their story and kind of use our platform to find their passion for raising awareness. And it's really about bringing people together in an effort to showcase that this injury can happen to anyone. And if you know someone who's going through it, a simple thing like texting, "Hey, are you okay? I just learned about concussions. I didn't realize," or just little things like that can go such a long way in the person's recovery. And I think for me, I just really don't want anyone to feel that same alienation. So we provide our social media as a way for people to reach out and connect with us and share what they're going through, and find that support and relief that has been missing. And it's so amazing to see these Zoom calls where, people tune in weekly and can be like-minded and share what they're going through. So I'm super grateful to be able to speak with all of you, because this is in the large scheme of things, this encompasses what challenging the stigma is. It's about bringing people together to learn more, to have these conversations. So we do that in a wide variety of ways. And it's honestly become my biggest passion. I've learned a tremendous amount about the brain throughout this journey, and any way that I can come and help and speak about my journey and what I've learned and some of the tools that I've incorporated to help with my recovery. I'm always like appreciative of that opportunity, because I've been grateful to meet so many experts in this field, and now I'm trying to give back as much as I can, and we really believe that Heads Up can be a beacon of hope for a lot of people. So I know I'm kind of rambling on here, Claire. I can dive into more if you want me to, but if you do have questions, feel free to pass them my way.
Yeah, of course. So can you share with us some of the tools that you have for support or coping or anything like that? Just any of the tools that you've learned throughout your experience. And as you said, you've learned a lot. So I guess what's been your biggest like aha moment?
No, that's a great question. I think, like, to preface this answer, it's important to understand that, what I was told during my recovery process back in 2014 when I was diagnosed with a concussion, we've learned a whole lot about how wrong that was. At the time, it was go in a dark room, don't be on your phone, don't move essentially for a week. And we're now starting to realize more of the holistic approach to the recovery process, and the need for connecting with people in short amounts to help with our mental health as well. So some of the things for me that I've found to be really beneficial, in terms of, I'm going to start with the mental health side, and which I relate to a lot as the recovery mindset. But things like gratitude, practicing that every day in a journal, writing 3 things that I'm grateful for. For me, as a kid, I was taught gratitude, but I would look at it in a very micro setting. But now I'm really trying to feel gratitude. And so, example, even just being in this conversation and having this chance is just, it makes me so grateful to think about where I've come to be able to be here. And so I do gratitude journals before I go to bed and when I wake up. Meditation's been an amazing tool for me. It really helps alleviate, the anxiety and depression. A wise person once told me anxiety is when you worry too much in the future, and depression is when you worry too much in the past. And I think that happens a lot in people with recovery, where we're not sure how long the recovery process is going to be, because we know it's not linear, and we look back at what our old life used to be and we wish we could have that. And so for me, meditation is such an amazing thing, because it slows everything down, and you connect with your thoughts, and just focusing on your breathing. It makes you present. And that's such an important aspect for the recovery journey, and especially when it comes to concussions, when impulses and kind of take over. I find meditation and just simple breath work, or breathing techniques can really alleviate those impulses, those that anxiety and that depression. So in the morning, I also do like 15 minutes every morning of meditation, and it allows me to be much calmer throughout the day. I found yoga to be super beneficial. That's kind of getting, as I mentioned, meditation's getting in tune with your thoughts. Yoga find allows you to get in tune with your body, and you're still working on those breathing techniques. So right now, I'm kind of just highlighting a lot of the holistic side to the recovery. These are things that I feel like enough don't or not enough people, sorry, talk about, especially when it comes to the brain. And I think a lot of people immediately look to like the medical side of things, but there's so much resources out there that we can use. Another thing that I found personally beneficial is supplementation. So things like omega 3s to help with the inflammation that arises with our brain injuries. That's definitely been a big tool. Nutrition as well. Eating things that have anti-inflammatories, things like salmon, blueberries, things like that you can incorporate in your lifestyle, are shown to be truly beneficial. And I think that's when it comes to the recovery process, we have to realize that everyone's going to react differently to certain therapies, certain modalities, but we have to be open-minded to what's out there and what's working for people, because what's working for me may not be working for you, may not be working for the next person, but it may work for that person after, right? And I think that's such an important aspect to the recovery journey for everyone, is trying cryptotherapy, trying physiotherapy or osteopath. Like there's so many different things that might work and might help you along this journey. And one of the biggest things that we try and do with Heads Up Can is highlight the different modalities that have worked with people throughout their journey. So those are some of the things that worked for me, but I definitely encourage everyone who ever feels like they're trying everything under the sun and it's not working to keep looking, because you will find something. And time again, I've met people who it was their last resort and that was the thing that worked out. So there is a light to the end of the tunnel.
Sounds sounds good. And so I have another couple questions here. So first one is, so with Heads Up Can, what do you think your best like reach out tool and advocacy tool has been so far?
I would say our advocate program has probably been the best um, tool that we've been able to create in terms of having that community. Like I mentioned before, we have 65 Canadians, and they walk all different types of life. Like we have lawyers, athletes, coaches, students, nurses, massage therapists, and it's really allowed us to identify all of the different aspects of life that concussions can impact, and brain injuries as well. And we were able to use their stories and their resources to help guide us with a lot of the content that we make. So for example, in our concussion awareness month, we dedicated all of September to highlight these individual stories. So we shared quotes that help them throughout their journey. We shared treatment options, we shared tips, and we wanted to really humanize the experience of a concussion, and show all of the different things that people have experienced because of it, but also all the different things that have helped them along the way. And we still, work with our advocate community, which is something that honestly I'm really proud about, because it's been able to give people a feeling of connection. I think that's something that we lose a lot with when we deal with brain injuries, or even mental health as well. We lose that feeling of connection, but we've been able to bring all of these people together, who have this commonality and have been able to connect with each other because of it. Like one of the best things that that makes my day is when I see, recently we saw two advocates do an Instagram live together, and it was just connecting through this program we had already created. And it's so amazing to see these like-minded individuals who are passionate about raising awareness because they were personally affected by it, doing their part now. So that's a big one. And then I guess the other one would be our concussion awareness facilitators, where we have 3 people who are actually all in recovery right now, who have dealt with lived experience, and they all kind of approached us saying that they want to raise awareness, and they just didn't know how to properly do it. And as Ryan and I have gone through this journey for the past 3 years, we've learned a lot about the social media landscape. And for me myself, like, I'm the creative director, so I've learned a lot on you know I guess I try and tell the story. That's my biggest passion, is sharing stories, to help really bring awareness. So within our 3 concussion awareness facilitators, we have someone who writes a blog, where they talk about their experiences, someone who does a podcast where they interview athletes who have dealt with concussions, and another person who has a nutrition segment and shares some of her recipes that have helped her in recovery. So it's kind of going back to that whole message where we're humanizing this injury and creating this shared experience platform. And it's been really cool to see it progress.
Okay, great. So speaking on, you said community and staying connected and the connectedness of brain injuries. Um, how do you find, or I guess during your recovery, how did you find maintaining friendships and making new friendships and those relationships? How did you find that throughout your recovery?
Yeah, it was really hard. I think for me, like, I owe a lot to my mom and my family, because they really reminded me the importance of my health and how that came first. Especially when you're in grade 12 and you're looking to go to university. I was the kid that would have been foolish enough to go back into the sport, not knowing what I know now. But my parents really made me understand, it's like, hey, this is your brain, you can't play around with it. So I really owe it a lot to them. With regards to my friendships, it's been hard. A lot of them didn't understand, and it wasn't that they didn't care about me, that I've come to learn. They just honestly had no full grip or full grasp of what I was going through. And as I mentioned earlier, when you're actually going through it, it's really hard to tell someone what you're experiencing. And especially in this hyper masculine culture within sports, saying, hey, I'm not feeling well, is typically seen as an excuse, not as a symptom. And that's something that I really think we can change as we grow Heads Up Can, and with some of the programs and efforts that we're doing. But a lot of my friends also dealt with their own concussion and mental health problems years later. And I've looked back, and I was able to gain this whole new perspective and be there for them. And I never had resentment towards, my friends. Some, just distance themselves, and, that's unfortunately the nature of certain friendships in life. They do come and go, but some stuck around and have still been there for me to this day. And it's honestly like, I really appreciate this question, Claire, because as Ryan has gone through his last 3 concussions, I've known him, and I've seen what it's done to him, and I've been able to look at him, because trust me, he was doing everything he can to be on this call today. But I saw, a lot of myself when I was struggling in what he was trying to force. And I said, look, man, like, they'll understand. If anyone's gonna understand why you can't make it today, it's this group and this community. So it's really given me a lot more perspective and clarity in terms of how I can help people now going through it. But yeah, it was definitely hard, and I definitely had to disconnect with a lot of friends that just brought more negativity to the circumstance than they did positivity.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. So here is another question about, so what about education within the medical community? Somebody has said, my doctor told me that a brain injury is quite like a bone, which typically takes 8 weeks to heal. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's a great question. I've heard a lot of stories of people going to doctors, and the thing is, these doctors only have a certain amount of knowledge to the brain. They're experts in a lot of other areas. When it comes to the brain, they're not going to be the first person to redirect you, unfortunately, sometimes, which I believe is how it should go. Unfortunately, I've heard a lot of stories where doctors, pride themselves on their ego and their knowledge and said one thing, like, for example, you're going to recover in 8 weeks, and the person, 5 months later is still dealing with that. And it really bothers me for what we know now about concussions. And the fact is, like, the research is happening at a rapid rate right now, but for far too long, it's had this top-down approach where until the people at the very top of these medical boards and committees declared one thing was beneficial, it would take years. Now, that process is definitely speeding up, and especially like now when we really need it the most, which is great, and it is a step in the right direction. But far too often, there are people who I think give misleading comments, and I think that's the toughest thing when it comes to brain injuries. If you're gonna say one thing but then you still have those symptoms, you're gonna really start losing your mindset, and your mental health will falter because of it in the recovery process, because you're expecting to be ready in 8 weeks to be back to normal, and unfortunately that didn't happen. So I guess for me, I've started to tell a lot more people, it's, look, go to your doctors, definitely get it checked out. One of the most important things when it comes to brain injuries and going to the hospital is to make sure that there is no bleeding in the brain. So there is a lot of benefits that come from it, but there's so many other organizations like the Ontario Brain Injury Association, the Ontario Neurotrauma Foundation, and even Parachute Canada that have created these resources that have a lot more clarity and understanding with the recovery process. But unfortunately, like, there's no set timetable when it comes to this. And that's the toughest thing that comes from dealing with these injuries. But I had the chance to talk to an occupational therapist, and she said something to me that has honestly changed my entire perspective. And I share it with everyone, especially when I do public speaking engagements, is sometimes these concussions or these brain injuries that we experience can uncover a lot about us. And what that means and how I interpret that is, so many times we can't find that light at the end of the tunnel. But as we go through this recovery process, and for me in particular, and I know a lot of other people as well, we start learning a lot about ourselves. We start getting more self-awareness, self-empathy. We start realizing that we need to take care of our body, and add things to our daily practice like meditation and mindfulness that will only help us down the road. And we can maybe not find a 2.0 version of ourselves or a better version, but a really awesome version of ourselves through this process where we can be really proud of what we've learned and what we've been able to accomplish through the recovery, and be better because of it.
Yeah, that's great. So I don't have any more questions in the chat here. If anybody has questions, they can let me know. Otherwise, I can always stop the recording and people can ask questions like that as well.
One of the other things that I'll just mention, and if people do have any more questions, please feel free to put in the chat. And is we're working on a really exciting project where we've partnered with the Ontario Brain Injury Association and the Ontario Neurotrauma Foundation. And we're doing this 6-part multimedia series where we're going to look at the 6 different aspects of recovery. So we're going to look at diagnosing a concussion, living with a concussion, the support systems that come or that are necessary and needed within the recovery process, returning to work, returning to sport, and returning to school. And we're going to have industry experts facilitating conversations with people with lived experience, and get all of these different stories in this 6-part multimedia series. There will be a podcast as well as there'll be a video format as well. And it's something that I'm really excited to work and to create, because I think it's going to provide this really amazing context of, one, the different people that experience concussions, but the different aspects that these concussions affect us. I think there's still this, lack of awareness and understanding of what people go through when they deal with a brain injury, and how long it can actually affect them. Because for me, the toughest thing that I hear is when, people tell me that, their closest friends and their family members, I've started to look at them like they're faking it. And it's pretty absurd to me when I hear that, because I try to put it in lay's terms where I say, our brains have 100 billion neurons in it. There are more connections in our brains than there are leaves in the Amazon forest. And so when we injure our brain, we don't know what the ramifications are going to be. And sometimes they don't show until months later. And sometimes they affect us for years. And the lack of empathy that has, you know, been so prevalent with our society to these invisible injuries and these invisible symptoms, is something that I'm really, I say myself, but I know our team at Heads Up Can is really working hard to counter and challenge the stigma and provide way more of an understanding, for just everyone, really. That, because you may not ever know what a concussion is or never experience it, but if your best friend does and you don't understand it, how can you help them or be there for them? And so we try and look at it from all aspects and all communities, while obviously prioritizing helping the people who are currently with lived experience, but also, identifying the support groups that are needed to help them during the recovery.
So another question here. So what is your golden nugget explanation to people who don't believe you, or I guess, brain injury stigmas?
Golden nugget information. Um, I feel like I almost just said it with my brain little spiel there, but I think this is a good question. You're putting me on the spot. Um, I think for me, it goes back to, look, like, if someone tells you that they've experienced a concussion, and they're trying to even, and they can even be vulnerable to that point, which I think a lot of us have a hard time doing in the first place, then they're reaching out for help. And I think that's the biggest thing, if in terms of a golden nugget, is, and this is goes for people who don't understand concussions and people living through it, is, you can't expect your own self to be able to recover. Or let me rephrase that: you can't expect to recover by yourself. You need people around you to help you and to understand. And so for me, I try and tell people, look, if you know someone dealing with it, or if you personally deal with it, you need to get to that point of vulnerability where you can get the help that you need. Because unlike bones in our bodies, and this is a really important aspect, unlike bones in our bodies, they don't heal. Our brain doesn't heal the same way. And I think for me, that's something I try and really hammer home, for a lot of people. It's like, hey, if you see your friend, and he doesn't look right, or she doesn't look right, and something feels off, the courteous thing to do would be to ask them, hey, is everything okay? And you can tell a lot and understand a lot from the way they answer that question. And I think it comes back to, caring for people and helping them through it. And again, it's something so small, but even just texting someone, that is going through it, can do so much for the recovery process. So I know that's not really one golden nugget, and I apologize if I kind of went all over the place with that answer, because it is, I think if we had that gold nugget, there would already be more of an understanding. So I think I'm still trying to find the best way to put it into terms for people who don't understand. But I hope that helped.
Yeah, of course. I liked your metaphor with using the rainforest as well, with the amount of leaves in the rainforest. That one resonated with me for sure.
I'm glad.
So about Heads Up Can, the multimedia series, when is that expected to be released?
There is no specific date. The hope and the goal right now is April. But we will be making a lot more information. A lot more information will come out in the coming weeks. And as well from the Obio, I'm sure they'll send an email to all of their communities as well. So the plan is April. It could be May, just, given the fact that we are still living in this pandemic. Unfortunately, timetables do tend to change. But yeah, April's the goal.
Awesome. Sounds good. And so what kind of funding does Heads Up Can rely on?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we have done most of our funding through apparel. I'm wearing the quarter zip right now. We have shirts, we have hoodies, we have a crew neck and crop top, and all of the money that we make from that apparel goes right back into the company to help us raise more awareness. So that's been our leading generator. That has really been amazing to see because for us, it's not, about how much we're selling. It's the fact that when we do sell a piece of apparel, that person becomes a beacon for awareness and our mission, obviously, to challenge the stigma, and they represent that. And it's funny because I remember, there was a time I was working at Good Life Fitness way back when, and I saw someone that I'd never met walk in with a Heads Up hoodie, and it was like the craziest experience for me. I was like, hey, that's my hoodie. I'm glad you're wearing it. And next thing you know, we're talking about his experience with concussions. And it actually made me reflect and think about, how many times that has happened where someone saw that hoodie, saw, the word concussion on it or something resonated and they say, hey, like, what's that about? And then it starts that conversation, which is so important to challenging the stigma. So that's been one of our main generate or revenue generators. We've also, hosted events and have been able to make some strategic partnerships that have helped us make the events free for people to attend and learn and gain valuable insight through our webinars. So that has definitely helped us as well. And we're still trying to find, multiple sources of revenue to help us sustain and keep our vision of raising awareness and becoming the biggest nonprofit in the country to raise awareness on concussions. That's our ultimate goal. And things like grants that the government has are things that we're constantly applying to as well, because this is, something that Ryan and myself are extremely passionate about and don't anticipate stopping this or seeing this passion stop at any point. So we're constantly looking for ways. But yeah, that was a great question. Thank you.
All right, we have another question here. So, how would you handle a situation if your neurologist is saying your symptoms are exasperated by mental health, but your mental health team says that you're still very symptomatic? This person's caught feeling very much in the middle.
I think this might be an unpopular opinion, but it is something that I have heard encounter or other people experience where they hear from one side, you should be fine, on the other side you're not fine, and you're trying to find that balance, and it makes it, talk about the alienation that comes from this recovery. That is a prime example of what that would feel like. I would say there's two ways that I would answer this. First one is, your body and what you're feeling better than anyone's going to tell you. So if you're still feeling the symptoms and still going about or still experiencing, mental health complications, that's an apparent thing that you would know and understand. And if your neurologist and for other people are saying that, oh, it should be fine, then you might want to find another opinion or someone else that will be a bit more empathetic to what you're going through. Because I don't think, for me personally, my mental health complications didn't go away when my concussion symptoms did. And I know my mental health complications were only there in the first place because of the concussion I experienced. Um, so I think getting another person's opinion, I'm pretty grateful because I had Ryan that I've been able to talk to, and we've been able to kind of learn a lot through our own experiences. But also, you can even just see from other people's stories that you're not alone in that situation. And I really would advise the person who asked the question to start trying, simple daily practices that I mentioned earlier that won't cost you any money, that could really help the mental health side of things. And then maybe at that point, if you can subside the anxiety and depression, you the symptoms will also go away, or you'll notice that you just have certain symptoms and not others. Because I think, especially now, I think mental health is only on the rise within our country, and what people are dealing with given this whole new world. So there is, that heightened aspect. But to say that, it has no relation to your brain injury. That to me just seems, I would say, not uneducated, but it just lacks any empathy of what you're going through. So maybe getting another opinion, finding another neurologist. I've met individuals who have seen upwards of 50 doctors, and then it took the 50th doctor to finally, and it's that balance of not just hearing what you want to hear, but also getting that information and resource that you need to get yourself better. So yeah, that I know that it's not really a full answer. Unfortunately, it's just really hard when it comes to neurologists who are experts, and some of the opinions and thoughts that they have. I'm by no means a doctor, and I never want to, come from a place of science. I'm more from a shared experience, a lived experience type of, I guess, communicator in a lot of ways. But there are so many other people that could and will understand where you're coming from. So maybe, finding those people would help you, because you need to have the best people in your corner.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
so we have no more questions currently in the chat. So I might pause the recording here. I'd like to thank you for answering all these questions as well. And I can unmute everybody. And if anybody has any last questions as well, we can finish off with that.
Yeah, thank you guys for letting me speak. Really appreciate it, and thank you, Claire. Claire and I go way back, so really appreciate her reaching out.